All right, I think we are live. Well, so I see that people are coming in, but let me get started. Hello, everybody, and welcome to our webinar on how to build AI literacy in procurement. You have obviously decided that this is an important topic for you and that you want to make a first step or a second or third step in that direction. So thank you very much for spending the next 60 minutes with us. I have with me Elouise Epstein, or Dr. Elouise Epstein and Konstantin von Büren, and they will introduce themselves in a moment. But just to give you a little bit of the lay of the land, we will today talk about what AI literacy is, means, and why it's important. We will then talk a little bit about how you can actually start building your own literacy through personal productivity tools or what you can expect from your organization. And based on that, we will then start talking a little bit more about what kind of use cases we find in procurement, where this literacy is actually coming in handy for you. So with that, welcome, Dr. Elouise Epstein. Welcome, Konstantin. Maybe you can just give us a quick introduction for yourself and what you're doing, and then we jump right in.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm a partner with Carney. I'm based out of San Francisco, and I do strategy, digital strategy for procurement and supply chain. And I'm an author, public speaker, and general rabble rouser.
I would actually say you're probably the most famous person in digital procurement these days, or over the last five years, let's say.
Well, thank you for saying that.
Perfect, Konstantin. So it's always easy to come after somebody like Dr. Elouise, huh?
Exactly. After that introduction, it's always easy. No, so I'm Konstantin. I'm based out of Paris, but originally from Germany. I'm one of the co-founders of Procure AI, and I work basically on everything that's go-to-market and operations at Procure AI. Maybe two words on what we do at Procure AI. I think it's always useful to understand that we are essentially building a unified and data and AI layer on top of existing procurement system that enables really an army of agents and use cases around automation in procurement. And we do that for quite some time now, over the last 4 or 5 years, working with quite a few large corporates across the globe.
An army of agents. What a wonderful expression. And I'm pretty sure that we will talk a lot about agents today as well. But I guess that puts us right into the discussion because, people have been talking about AI for 50 years. They have been talking about AI use cases for a good amount of time. Now, for the last year and a half, or for the last 3 years, let's say we have talked about large language models a lot. And now in this year, I would say we have started to explode on the terminology of agents. In order to make sure that we are actually living up to the expectation we try to set with calling this how to build AI literacy, let's maybe start at the very beginning. What does AI literacy even mean? Who wants to take a stab?
I'll take a stab at it because that's a lot what I spend my time doing. It's being comfortable with. So and we have to talk generationally because there is a demarcation between those of us over 40, and that's arbitrary. So I know some people will fall in both categories. Those of us over 40, we don't have the same building blocks or the literacy building blocks to understand excuse me, AI or even digital in the same way. And then those that are under 40 have a different relationship to AI. And so as it comes to literacy, how do we feel comfortable with and learn and then make use of, more importantly? And that's, to me, that's the game. And again, it's going to be two different roadmaps for depending on your generation.
Well, I have actually created a poll here and I let that run in parallel while Consti, you might want to give maybe a different flavor to it as well.
Yes, so I think Elouise, I think you just made a very great point that actually is like depends essentially on which generation you're from. I haven't seen it in that way yet, but it's very, I think it's very much on point. Maybe to add to this, for me, it's really about, when I think about AI literacy, it's like the practical understanding of what AI can do and what it can't do. And in now with this new step of generative AI, also knowing how to ask the right questions, or what are like the right prompts to get to a result that you want to, but also evaluate those outputs in a critical way, and understanding, okay, what can I integrate into my decision making? Did I learn out of this, etc. And obviously, in relation to procurement, this then becomes much deeper, because essentially it's there. I would almost define it less as being like a data scientist, but more like developing essentially the ability to collaborate with those AI agents that we will interact with more and more, and understanding when to trust an automation and when human judgment essentially is needed, and then how to embed AI into that process without losing control.
And I think you already got a little bit into why it is important, but I think one important differentiation that I would like to still bring in is the difference between what is AI awareness and what is AI literacy. So we prepared this very simple slide. In procurement, everybody loves icebergs, so therefore we just used exactly that model. And I think just to quickly explain and differentiate these two things, AI awareness basically just means AI exists and it has some sort of applications in life, in procurement, in whatever. That is great. That's important. And I think if you're not aware of AI today, you might have slept under a rock basically for the last 2 years. But it is still something that is out there. There are people that really have never engaged with it in any meaningful form. And AI literacy, as Konstantin just started to point out, is really about how it works, how to question it, how to challenge it, when to trust, when not to trust, and all of those good things that Elouise actually mentioned in her first definition of the term AI literacy. And I personally find it always very funny, like if you would ask somebody, hey, do you think it's important that you can write and read? People would say like, duh, of course I do. Whereas when it comes to AI, hey, how important is it? People are not that straightforward. There's a lot less yes and no. And looking now at the poll, thank you very much, everybody, for participating. We see
before you go into the poll, I want to there is like read and write and AI literacy are going to be the core of school, and anybody with kids in school or even at university, the educational systems are struggling with this right now, this exact problem. And if you're old enough like me, when I was in young school, when I was a youngin in school, we couldn't use a calculator because it was cheating. And now in 2025, that seems so absurd and stupid, really. So are we going to tell kids that are learning to read and write that they can't use the single most powerful tool that will drive the rest of their entire lives? And that's the struggle. And that's why AI is real, and it's not the next blockchain, the next overhyped technology, but it is front and center. And we have to stop looking at it as cheating, and really, how do we harness it?
Yeah. And I think there's an entire discussion to be had around what kind of skills do we therefore need to teach them. And this is exactly why we're here today, and why, again, like so many of you have tuned in. And I think looking at the results, it's quite interesting, because we see that just over half of the people here are saying that they feel ready to confidently use AI in the workplace. And that's great. And I hope that doesn't mean that you know how to use ChatGPT, but that you actually have already this broader context and understanding of AI. But there's, on the flip side, almost 50% of people saying that they have no or just some experience or confidence in their AI capabilities. And I think this is like the first step is to admit something. And so therefore us admitting that we all can still learn here, I think is extremely important. So just to go back on that point, that you made, Consti, and maybe we can just go a little bit deeper on why is it so important for people to be literate in AI?
I think it starts like I think the analogy with like the calculator is pretty much on point. I use often the analogy to like financial literacy as well, right? When we talk about why it's so important and why essentially it becomes a must-have on a personal level, because without it, you really risk falling behind in terms of productivity, but also in terms of career relevance. Maybe that's not tomorrow, but the day after tomorrow for sure. And I think that's on the personal level, and then on the organizational level, essentially it's critical, not only for the success of the company but also for compliance reasons to understand, right? Because we know it's going on already. People are dumping very sensitive data into ChatGPT, and that's where you have to be really, really careful. But I think also the reality is that on the corporate side, very little has been systematically be done on AI literacy, and most companies don't yet offer like a structured training or structured like a path essentially around it. That kind of means, in my opinion, that people need to find their own path right now until this is more structured, and they need to experiment. They need to really to learn by doing and bring essentially that literacy factor back to themselves, but also obviously then if you're a leader in your category, then also basically into your teams. Um, and I think there's a difference between just simply having an AI and actually using it to achieve faster decisions, real savings, and stronger resilience. And I think that's why this digital AI literacy is so important.
Anything you would like to add, Elouise?
I would just add that part of, and I think this is a little bit reflected in the poll results, is the technology is moving, is evolving so fast. Even just from January, and you and I were at a conference in, what was it, April? And what I was just looking at the deck last night. What I presented in April was like, it is like vastly different than what I'm going to present next week. It's like, wow, like so. I mean, I can be ready to go and willing to learn, but like keeping up with this stuff is really fast. And I would also just take my usual dig at CIOs. CIOs are completely ill prepared for this AI in the workplace, as probably even all or organizational structures not ready for this yet.
Mm-hmm.
Even here in Silicon Valley, everybody's still like grappling with it. They're laying people off for sure because they can, but everybody's still grappling with it. And so there's the tools we could make use of, and then there's the tools we have. Because let's be honest, Copilot is not the kind of AI we're talking about here.
Yeah. And I mean, like, I know that in the EU, and maybe Constance, you can talk a little bit about that. There's actually some regulation around what companies need to do because, like, exactly this point of everybody trying to figure it out themselves is kind of not ideal, I would say. Do you in the US have also some sort of legislation that is basically telling companies to enable their workforce in any meaningful way?
We've given up on legislation. We have moved to a monarchy.
All right,
Um,
let's leave it at that maybe before we get into muddy waters.
but no, but we don't have good AI laws on the books yet, um, uh, actually, I would point out that China has really advanced sort of they've tackled legislation around that as pretty significantly too. So, but not so much here in the U.S.
Konzi, would you like to explain to everybody a little bit more about what the EU AI Act is then and what that
Yes,
actually says?
there's a lot of stuff into the EU AI Act, so I think that's a separate webinar if you want to talk about the entire piece of it. But I think the impact on literacy is actually quite interesting, and I think compared to US, the EU is obviously always very good at bringing out regulation. If that's now then good regulation or bad regulation, that's like stands to be seen, I would say. But I think basically in the UAI Act there is a paragraph in there about literacy and like the responsibility for companies essentially to train their employees on the use of AI if they're using AI in their company, right? So I think that part of this legislation I think is very good because it kind of at least puts up a bit of pressure on corporations to make sure that their employees essentially are keeping up with that topic and are getting the right training. And even though the legislation is in place, right, you can still see that it's not entirely happening yet. So I think this will come hopefully within the next 24 months, right? Which is, as Elouise rightfully pointed out, right? In 24 months, we will be at a completely different point as we're today, as technology is moving so quickly. But yeah, long story short, this act essentially tells us actually we have to train our people. We have to basically make sure that they know how to interact with these solutions and with this technology.
So, and I will launch another quick poll now on this very question. Is your company actually providing any meaningful training to you? Yes or no? Very simple. Because the funny thing about the EU AI Act is that paragraph 4, I believe it is literally this short. It has like a total of maybe 5 sentences. So if you think about a normal good EU regulation, you can imagine how long that is. And so they have dedicated a full 4 or 5 sentences to it. But they are very powerful because they simply say you have to provide training to people if you want to deploy AI in it. And so therefore, I think quite something that we will see more about. And again, what training means is a completely different discussion altogether. But I think the poll, again, is showing us a more or less 50-50 split between people receiving training and people not getting what they would be hoping for, maybe. So I leave that up for another couple seconds there, and we see how it changes. But thanks again for that.
I want to interject because most of the training is trash because it's I did say I was a rabble rouser.
That's why we love you. That's why you're here.
Yeah, because just buying a learning management system, a Coursera or whatever, and making it available to employees, we're not going to learn AI literacy. I mean, none of us have cybersecurity literacy just by taking one of these classes to be certified. So we have to really think about how do we learn, because as humans, we learn in community. We learn when it's very personalized. You just give me an abstract thing about AI and sales, that means nothing to me because I'm not a salesperson. So if I'm going to learn, it has to be relevant to me. And so as we think about what makes training, I think we have to really go back to the fundamentals, because my fear is we're going to see a lot of these, oh, well, Microsoft, gives us this training for free, and it's not going to actually move the needle on AI literacy.
I have a slightly different perspective on it just because I know my personal learning style and I work with a company that is actually specialized on training. And so this old saying is that 10% is coming from classroom training, 20% is coming from then exercises, and then 70% is actually coming from on-the-job training, coaching, and experimenting with things, right? So that is very much speaking to what you just said. I personally, on the other side, though, see I need to read a book. I need to understand the theory first for the training, for the actual experimentation to make sense, and for me to have a focus and an objective in it. Because, I mean, again, we talked about language a little bit before, and I'm trying to learn Italian because I live in the Italian part of Switzerland. Damn, I tried to read a grammar book, didn't do anything for me. But just going out there speaking and just talking, that doesn't work either. And so therefore, I think having this balance of something that is structured and gives you like the framework, I think is important to then experiment with purpose and with a clear objective, I would say.
Right, but let me just So that yes, I absolutely get that. But you have to then say, why wouldn't you have that pre-learning you're talking about where you learn the theory customized to you versus one system that everybody in the enterprise trains on? And in an AI world, you can have that. You could literally go to ChatGPT and ask it to teach you all the theory before we go into the class next week.
Yeah.
But
And
I think, but that comes back, I think, to what you said at the very beginning, Elouise, right? That if that's different generations or different types of learning that people have, like there's different learning approaches, right? Where if well, I'm not in my 40s yet, but I also essentially, for me, it was the same. When I went to school, it was learning from a book, right? That was basically, okay, we have the textbook, that's what we learn from. And that still is, in terms of my intuition, that's still very, very strong. So if I want to get some in-depth knowledge, I will take up a book. If I can now pair this up, as exactly as you said just now, it's like with a personalized training, if with ChatGPT or the likes, then this can be a very strong combination. Then if I look at the next generation, for example, I mean, they barely read books anymore. They consume everything on video, right? So basically having it seems like almost if it's a training course or whatever format it is in the end of the day, has to really cater to the type of generation you're from, on the type of learnings that you are used to and that you are essentially want to interact with.
And that's my point. In an AI world, we can all have individualized training versus, I mean, well, like I've been through this for a couple of decades and then some of this idea that we would just have one training for everybody. And we might do one, like couple sessions in person and then everybody, goes and does it offline. But like you're right, the younger generations, they only learn through visual media. And so we need to be able to cater to them dynamically and Fabian, give it to you in a book or in whatever format. And a lot of people like audio. So in an AI world, we can have that. But the learning systems, the trainings, and the people offering trainings haven't evolved that, and that's a big gap.
Yeah, and I think there's no right or wrong really. It's just really about trying for everybody to find their own way. And so therefore I think that's the exciting part about it. So if you have that appetite, if you have that ambition to learn it, you will be able to find something out there. But I had a conversation on Tuesday with somebody from a Big Four consulting company, and he was saying to me that half of his team are just waiting for the company to come and give them the AI training. And that was like consultants that are actually coming to you, talking to you about it. And so that's something that is rather worrisome, I would personally think.
Well, I think they're not those 50 whoever percent or whatever, they're not going to be with that firm for much longer. If you're waiting, I mean, just think about how fast this is going. Your learning curve gets steeper, and maybe if you're in your 20s, then it's fine because you'll bridge the gap faster. I can tell you when I was in my 40s and now that I'm in my 50s, that bridging that gap is really hard. And that's why I push people who are in my age group. I push them really hard to get going because you can't just randomly wake up one day and say, I'm going to learn AI. It's a big lift.
Well, and that's actually a good segue into another question I wanted to discuss. And it's coming back to something that you also kept presenting back in April already. And I think it has been on LinkedIn and other medias well represented. And that is the tech failure rate, right? So we want to slowly get now into this discussion around AI and procurement and what we can do about that. But one of the things that I think you say is like it's somewhere around 80+% of tech implementations fail. Recently, Constantly made me aware of a study of the MIT saying that 95% of Gen AI implementations fail. Again, failure to be defined. And I think this is really important part because I was at a conference last week where somebody left it right there and I was like, yeah, they failed. It's like, yeah, great. Thank you. You just really screwed things up for everybody. But what is your take on that? Like, where's the maturity, the digital maturity of procurement from your perspective? And have we actually evolved, or is that still more or less the same?
Okay, so the so when we say that 84, I would say 100% of digital transformations fail because the expectation is you take a big company, like a big bank or a big pharma company, and you sort of, and this is, I'll blame consultants, is the consultants go and they tell the big bank, you should be like Facebook or you should be like Google. And so we'll do a digital transformation and make you like that. And so the expectations are just completely out of whack. But of course, the board signs off on it and the CEO signs off because what old industrial company or whatever legacy company doesn't want to be data driven, AI driven, blah blah blah. But it's an unrealistic expectation. And I love that 95% stat of failures because I think that's technically true, but it's because the expectations are out of whack. Because what we want or what we're being promised is that, oh, well, you can have an army of agents working for you and it will completely automate procurement. But what happens is that's the vision, and part of that's just we all imagine it. We like oftentimes, and I am the most guilty of this, is sometimes we just imagine what it could be, but in reality, what it ends up being is corporatized AI. It's, oh, well, we've got Copilot because that's the only thing that we can have, safely in enterprise. And it's the CIO not wanting to push themselves and take any risks, which is fine on its surface. But the disconnect between, well, I imagine it's going to do this, but I get Copilot. And so then of course we when you ask me, was it a failure? Well, yeah, it's a failure because like you didn't let me do anything. And by the way, you didn't let me, even if you put OpenAI or Gemini in to the enterprise, well, did you open up all the data to me? And of course the answer is no. Yeah, of course it's 95%. Let's just call it 100% failure rate. But it's because we're not actually doing the right, we're not going after the right initiative.
Konzi, what's your take on that?
I would 100% agree. I think especially I like the wording of corporatized AI. I think I actually went into that study to really understand it better, right? And that was the point number one, right? Essentially, solution providers with their clients essentially struggle to design workflows that capture the real benefits of AI. So essentially, if that's corporatized AI, I call it sometimes like hybrid AI, essentially in the sense where you kind of you plug in AI into existing workflows, and like this, obviously, like it. That's where the 95. That's why the 5 winning% essentially comes from. This is live. This is in production, right? But still, you're not gonna get the same ROI if you would design workflows in a new way. And I think that's where we not only in procurement, but I think the entire enterprise really shy away from, which makes a lot of sense if you come back if you think about, it might get a bit too technical, but if you think about especially all the Gen AI, so LLMs, right? Because LLMs are essentially non-deterministic algorithms. So meaning if you put in the same input 10 times, you will always get a different output, even if it's similar, but it's non-deterministic. And I think in business, that's often not necessarily what we want, right? We want, when we put a certain input in it, we want to have a certain output. And that's why we sometimes struggle essentially to say, okay, let's let the AI essentially, let's use a workflow that's perfect for the AI, where we essentially don't know exactly what output we'll have in the end. So I think that's one reason. I think then literacy, the reason why we're here today and this webinar, is another one, right? Where I was just like, you still have a lot of, which makes sense currently to build up the trust, the human in the loop, but with low literacy, essentially that leads also then to lower adoption. And I think that's where literacy becomes very, very important, that we as a human are not the blocker in the end to have these productivity gains that AI can create for us.
And can
And
I just add to that? Because there's the Harvard Business Review just came out with a new article about a week ago about what's called AI generated work slop.
I was going to
And
get to that.
yeah, okay, yeah.
I love
And
it.
just a quote from it, AI generated work content that masquerades as good work but lacks the substance to meaningfully advance a given task. And I think that's exactly what Konstantin, you're getting at.
Yeah. And for everybody who hasn't read that, just Google for work slop. It's really interesting because I think it's saying that like almost everybody has experienced it, and people look more negatively at people that have sent them this kind of work output that looks shiny but is literally shit on the inside. And so it takes them a lot more time to decipher and get to grasp with what did I even get here, to then get to the point of like, okay, now I need to rework it and get through all of it myself. So really, really interesting article. I can highly recommend reading that as well.
Well, and tools like Copilot contribute to work slop, whereas like and I think Constantine, what you all are building and what like those other things outside of the corporate environment are far more sophisticated and not just, hey, let's randomly throw some stuff into Chat GPT or really
But
Copilot.
I mean, I obviously would agree on that. However, we also have that challenge now, essentially, of like you still need to make whatever project it is that you are working on with your client. You have to make it a success, right? So you have these discussions with your clients about, okay, how much are you adjusting workflows versus adjust workflows essentially for the AI, or how much adjusting your AI workflow essentially to the corporation's workflow, and without entirely destroying ROI, right? And I think the reality, what you said, Elouise, as well before, is that the grand big vision is that we have this army of agents who are essentially doing a lot of the jobs for us and doing a lot of the automation for us, but we are still quite far away from that reality, right? And I think that's where you have to pick your use cases where this can already help you, right? Where essentially the existing workflows are not destroying the ROI, and eventually build upon that until we have more trust, until we then design workflows that are more suitable for AI agents. Because I 100% agree with you that we're all working towards that vision, but the reality is also we have to take the bait. Like we have to learn how to crawl and learn how to walk before we can start running.
And we had a very interesting and yet scary discussion yesterday on exactly this topic. So we now heard, I think, army of agents 3 times during this call. Everybody is afraid of that army coming after them already. So yesterday we had a conversation with people that really know their world and that people listen to, and they were just saying, "Yeah, but can you just throw an agent at it and let it do it?" Or like. Maybe not the best idea in the world. So therefore, again, like you being critical thinkers as our audience here is the number one thing that you need to hold up, because people will try to sell you everything is easy, you don't need to do anything, and like, yeah, let me just implement this thing for you. It's super quick. So therefore, be a little bit careful when people oversimplify how easy it is to do all of these things, because as Constance just pointed out, you need to control it. You need to give it the guardrails in which to operate, rather than just saying, yeah, this is my negotiation agent. Ciao. So,
Well, this gets to the more we increase AI literacy, the better consumers or buyers of the technology, and then we can see through all because a lot of what's out there in the market, and I'm not just talking procurement, I mean in general, is yesterday's technology, yesterday's processes, yesterday's consulting, all with just some AI, some agents or AI thrown in there. And so the one outcome I want of AI literacy is for us to make better decisions. Because when I see and it's not my employer that but when I see a lot of these consulting engagements and AI transformations, I'm like, That's the same. That's not reimagining the enterprise around AI. That's just yesterday's enterprise with some AI sprinkled in.
Exactly. Perfect. So now, before we end talking about a little bit of applications and procurement, which we wanted to do for a moment, one thing that I think would be really interesting is to hear your story, because now you're obviously somebody who spends the entire career and yeah, day working on these topics. Konstantin, on the same, but different. You're building a company around this topic. So, what is your personal AI journey? What did it look like? How did you get to it? And like, how are you using AI now? And Elouise will then share a little bit of how you can actually practice or like how you can apply some AI capabilities to your personal life and improve your productivity. But just give us a little bit of a flavor of how did you get here?
All right. So if you go back 2 years, and I have to give a shout out to Shaquille Nathu, who's a partner at Carney, a colleague of mine. He jumped on this bandwagon early, and I did not. And I was a skeptic, and I was sitting there throwing darts at him, saying, "Oh, this is just stupid. This is going to go nowhere." And then I had this like
This
epiphanal
is
moment.
recorded, by the way. You know that,
Yeah,
huh?
yeah, yeah. No, I will send this to him afterwards. But I have to give him credit because he jumped on it, and I didn't, and I was just throwing darts at him, saying, "Ah, this is just gonna blow over." And then I had this like I started to use it, and I started to see it permeating. Again, my wife's a professor, and started to see it challenging society. And that's what really intrigued me. It's less about procurement and more about the societal changes. And then it was like, oh, this is going to be different. And so then I've just been learning and pushing myself. And as of I was for the conference we were at earlier this year, I wanted to really push myself. So I sort of randomly threw out that why don't I do an AI masterclass? Really geared for people over 40. And turns out that was a hit. And I've been doing variations of that. And as I've been talking to people, I have a whole list of people on my whiteboard that just want training from me, that want to be part of Elouise's like private AI training. And and what I realized is that this there is a lot of demand for this, of people breaking it down. And so then at DPW in the summer, I did an AI primer, and then next week at DPW, I'm doing another master class in this, and that forces me to learn it so that I can get people, so I can teach people. And I think the other breakthrough that I had, the real two real breakthroughs, is one is seeing tools like Notebook LM, which is an AI productivity tool that is really, it's a Google tool, and it's free to use, where you're bringing in data, you're bringing in research. It has a private LLM dedicated to your topic, and then it will create outputs, whether it's a mind map or a briefing document, and it's just going to keep growing. And that was just like an aha. Why should I go fool around with Word and Excel and PowerPoint when I can just have this one integrated AI tool? So that was a breakthrough. And then also shout out to Matt McCarrick. He's my AI buddy, the person that helps me in my journey.
Mhm.
And he got me to understand the concept of, well, I can learn how to prompt, or I can just go to the AI and prompt it. And then I just ask AI to improve the prompt. And then if I want to build an agent, I just tell it what I want it to do. But instead of building an agent, I build an agent that builds agents. And then now I can build as many agents as I want just by telling it, just by prompting. And so that unlock was just, that was like at that point now, like there's no stopping me now, because now I really like, that's the game right there.
All right. Well, I think this is a lot to take in and hard to replicate because I think, again, like you need to have that own motivation. You need to have somebody to actually point you in certain directions. And only if it then actually works for you, you will get to this, let's go on. I think this is really.
But it's about doing it. AI is not something you learn passively. It's active. You have to do it. And part of the reason I was throwing darts at Shaquille is because I wasn't doing it. And I was just sort of, and if you want to learn AI, here's a tip: stay off LinkedIn, because people that are posting about AI on LinkedIn have no idea what they're talking about. If you really want to, there's a ton of people on TikTok and YouTube that are really like, that will give you snippets and bits of information because they're showing you that they're doing it. And I think that's what's missing in the corporate world.
Okay. I feel a little bit personally offended because every once in a while I do say a thing or two about it, but I let it pass. Konstantin, what was your journey?
I probably have had a bit more classical essentially way into it. Doing my was like the first time I really encountered AI was doing my studies at MIT, right? So, and obviously this was not LLM based, the things that we were doing, but we were already looking at neural networks, right? But also had more classical applications of like of machine learning, also like NLP, so natural language processing, and so on and so forth. Um, and that's basically how I got into it. And I think I would 100% agree with with two things that Elouise just said. I think number one is just like it really helps you just doing it, and it helped me back in time as well, right? If you start running algorithms, right, versus obviously today it's more prompting, but this really helped me understand what essentially is the math also behind it, which you don't necessarily need to fully understand today, but helped me back then to really understand how I get those in a regression analysis. How do I get to those predictions? Are these calculated? I think that's number one. I think, but also I had the same as Elouise just mentioned. She has an AI buddy, and I had the same, right? If that's your classmates or your friends, and I had 2 or 3 people with like whom I'm were going through my studies there, with whom I exactly talked about these things. And when I was stuck, I had like usually a smarter person helping me about like how to get unstuck and how to move forward, right? Um, and now basically in the last few years at Procure.ai, that's where we started, like with the more, I call it now, traditional algorithms, right? And then basically with the release of ChatGPT / with LLMs, obviously there's like the amount of applications you could work on and how you can interact with that type of technology became way easier, right? So and that I think essentially also was for me then another boost of like not only productivity but also of learning, right? Because exactly as we talked about before, you can use essentially an LLM very, very nicely in order to like teach you more stuff about this technology. And that's really how I interacted well, how I essentially interacted with AI in general, but also Gen AI. And essentially today, similar to what Elouise said, I use it a lot, right? It doesn't get me from 0 to 1, but it gets me from like 0 to 0.5, right? And I think if you know how to use prompts and how to leverage essentially how do you build your own agents and so on and so forth, this is really a game changer of to your productivity and how to like also not only your productivity but also how to see the possibilities of what's ahead, what you can do with it.
And I believe like one of your buddies is your co-founder, Eve. And when I see how he's doing it, I'm always just like, oh my goodness, like I'm screwed. So,
I mean, that's the beauty now. Now I have like 20 plus engineers working at Procure.ai. When I'm stuck on something, I can just like these guys are really in the trenches writing writing the code, really building that different types of algorithms, and that's obviously helps a lot as well.
yeah, I believe so. So, Elouise, would you mind talking a little bit about what everybody can do right now, today? You mentioned Notebook already, but can you just talk a little bit about what it is that people can do in order to really get started on their own journey? And I launch a little poll on the site just to get a feeling for what people are already doing as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a big believer in personal productivity because there's nothing that will prevent any of us from using AI for personal productivity. And even if the company you work for is not very AI savvy and you only get Copilot and use it for personal productivity outside of work. And there's a ton of things you can do. And here I'll just show you a quick slide that I like to use is because the whole point is to start doing. And these are a handful of different things that you can do. There's no reason not to have note taking. There's no reason not to have an AI assistant. And there's a million things that an AI assistant can do. And I'm doing a master class, as I said, for DPW next week, and we're going to build an agent live. And I just asked ChatGPT for some examples, and it like the examples it gave were really pretty good. And so again, that's just an AI assistant that's helping me prep. And of course, ChatGPT has memory, so that it's learning. And a funny thing, I was asking. About a friend of mine is preparing for retirement. He came up with this retirement manifesto, and so I was like, I've never heard that before, and so I asked ChatGPT for it to help me with a retirement manifesto. And it's one of the things it said is you have to start thinking about changing your identity from digital futurist to, like just retired person. And I'm like, why did you come up with digital futurist? And it's because it has learned about me for so long. And so which is a long way of saying use it for an assistant and just helping you to brainstorm and think and run ideas. Because I'll tell you, as an older person, my first inclinations, oh, I'll just go call somebody or text somebody and say, hey, what was such and such and such and such? When I just go to now I can just go to Chat GPT and have it do my thing. So start with personal productivity.
And I mean, like looking at the results, it's extremely interesting. So a lot of people are using ChatGPT now. Like 83% of the participants are actually saying, "Yep, we use ChatGPT," which is great. But when you then look at the note taker or the meeting scheduler, like what a drastic drop. And I mean, like for me, not using a meeting scheduler anymore is something that is just like how I hate an email to say, "Hey, can you give me 5 time slots?" Like, it's like such a waste of time. Or like if you ever seen a result of a note taker, I mean, it's mind blowing. There's like I was one of those kids in school where I had to look at other people when they wrote down something because I never could really tell what was important enough to write down. Now you just get the full transcript, you get like the highlights, you see where people said something, you get the action items, and you can just forward it with the click of a button to them. So I will never write notes anymore. Like it's just not something that is really interesting. And so therefore seeing like this stark difference, I think that's my like have a look at Calendly and those other tools.
Well, but this gets to a really important thing is if you think about SRM and even category management, think about all the calls we have with our suppliers, or if you do expert interviews or whatever you do, like the whole key to the future is capturing all of that knowledge. And you don't have to do anything except just have it record and then put it into what becomes a gigantic corpus of your SRM program. And so why are we not doing that? Like that 33% is, I would say concerning, but I don't mean that negatively. It's like that should be a signal that, because I mean, and I know why we do that, because it's like we sit through 100 internal meetings that are useless and shouldn't even be meetings. But thinking about really amping that up and coming up with a program, a sophisticated program around SRM.
I think, yeah, and this is something that is already possible even if you just have a Copilot. So
Yes,
some of those things
exactly.
are even possible with just that. But there was a question, and I know this conversation is I enjoy the conversation, so therefore there were SRM, by the way, means supplier relationship
Yeah.
management.
Yes.
Question
Sorry.
came in. But this brings us now back to procurement, right? So AI literacy and procurement. Consti, we put together this one slide here where we try to give a feeling for what does AI and procurement even mean. Can you maybe talk to that for a little bit? Because there was a question where somebody asked, what is where do people already use it today? Where is it most successful, basically?
Sure. Yeah, I think it like generally like you should look at the slide in more detail essentially in the aftermath of this call, because there's a lot of stuff in here, right? It's like basically we're talking about like 50 plus different agents across different procurement processes. And but the interesting piece essentially that comes to the question that Fabian just asked, like what are the use cases essentially that we already see today? And I think right now what I can see with my clients is that they're starting to use AI around intake management, around like tactical sourcing, so like tailspin automation, for example, because they have specific problems in that area, right? For example, like why would you start intake management? Maybe you're fed up with forms, or basically the free text requests you get are terrible. Or essentially like you have a bunch of orders that should be run through the catalog, but they're not, right? And if you have these type of problems, intake management can like an AI-based intake management can really help you essentially making sure that requests are routed the right direction and it captures all the information. As Elouise just pointed out, it's really about capturing the information, making sure you have it there. And then for tailspin automation / like autonomous sourcing, I think it goes in a similar way, which is like it's just like very repetitive tasks where we really can like an AI-based solution can really help you because essentially can just do many more things that are not bound to time. And for us, we can just do one thing at a time instead of being able to do 100 things at a time. So that's I think where we see right now a lot of interest. And these are great early wins because they immediately free up capacity, they accelerate decisions, they generate value, they generate savings, and so on. But I think what brings me to the point was like maybe just my passion project of like what I'm excited about essentially is that this isn't like a one-off, right? This is, if you look at this, it can be very modular and very scalable, and you can start small with these type of use cases, but then you can essentially add more capabilities. If you want to have a central buying desk attached to all of this, if you want to have more like prompt-based spend analytics, for example, and so on and so forth, you can add this, and it can really evolve step by step, right? And that's why what Elouise said is also important. Is like you have to bring the data into one central place, right? Otherwise, it's really just a dumb algorithm, right? So that's so important, and make sure when you get on this journey with AI and procurement that you plan it step by step, but essentially you make sure that you already today capture data, that you know that the different types of solutions that you're using, or for example, only one solution if you're working with Procure AI, then it really makes sure that you have these integrations into different systems. And yeah, I think that's where it's getting really exciting, because the possibility then is endless, right? If you have, as Elouise also pointed out, if you have all the recordings from calls with suppliers, there's so much value in that type of data, right? That currently is being lost, right? We're not getting anything from that. And if we start coding that data, if we start bringing that data into the decision making, into like the analysis of the different algorithms, that's where it gets really exciting.
Okay, what excites you, Dr. Elouise? Like I'm really curious to hear that now. And by the way, there's a question on if AI is gonna kill or replace procurement orchestration, which is one of those hype things that we've also seen over the last 18 months. So maybe you can weave that a little bit into your take.
Oh, that's a tough question to not be controversial. What was the first part of the? Oh, what am I excited about? I'm excited about just all the productivity tools, and one of the things that Notebook LM is just keeps adding is it'll take all your data and create a dynamic podcast, which I just think is just amazing. And then now it'll create a dynamic video, and it'll create a dynamic Q&A, quiz. And from a productivity point of view, just being able to see your data. So like all my notebooks are my data, and just seeing how I can interact with that data in ways that just weren't even imaginable. And just to sort of bring that to light, like years ago, I've had many ideas of exploring with data, and I got on this kick and this personal life of like, I wanted to analyze the themes in country music songs. And so I even went as far as to go to Upwork and hire somebody to write Python scripts to like go pull all the information down. And then I sort of Constantine's point about I tried to find somebody to help me do natural language processing and like all of this stuff. And it was just so complicated. And and I had like, like dealing with Python and dealing with all these other things. I didn't know what I was doing. Now I'm just like, okay, give me an agent that goes and pulls down, like, and I can just tell it and it will then bring this back. So I have this amazing power at my fingertips. It's truly just like I get excited of all the things that I could never do because I'd have to rely on people with technical experience I didn't have. And now it's like, well, just ask AI to do it and it'll do it.
Who
Um,
doesn't hate relying on people? But if
yeah,
we bring it back to the procurement front,
yeah, the
where's the excitement on that end? And what about that orchestration beast?
Well, I'll say one thing. So on the slide you were just showing, as folks like Constantine automate all of that, then that will change what procurement does. And by the way, that's happening in legal, IT, and finance. And as that happens, those jobs go away. As that happens to procurement, I'm like, yes, please, and thank you, because then I'm excited because we are going to move directly into the business. And so we're bringing procurement to the business, and maybe procurement as a function doesn't even exist anymore because we are now in the business, and that very much excites me, and I'm bullish about it.
And I think this is also where, back to the point from earlier, where the skills we need in order to play that role will be so vastly different. They will not just be us understanding the AI, but also this interpersonal part will become a lot stronger. I have one final poll, just to get a feeling for what people are experimenting with right now. I have to say, what am I excited about? I think category management, people who know me know that I'm quite excited about that part. And I think now with this opportunity of things being more connected, that can again get a completely different flavor. And so that's what I'm at least hoping for. So, okay, but because we're running out of time and we're almost at an end, we prepared a couple of more questions that we could have asked, but I have really just one last one. What is your recommendation? What should people do today, latest tomorrow, but very latest tomorrow, in order to actually get more acquainted? The 50% that say we're somewhat or not prepared for AI at all, but potentially even the 50%.
I-
Elouise.
I'm gonna I'm gonna try and do this quickly. If I could write you a check for 20 agents, and so by that check, I mean I give you a check and I'll create 20 agents for you, just hypothetical agents.
Mhm.
What would those 20 agents do? And I want you to go away and think about it, write down on a piece of paper, on a whiteboard, what would you have 20 agents do? Or like we talked about army of agents, well, it's your job to design them. And that actually is pretty exciting, and it's hard. It's hard to do, but if I could give you 20 agents, that and so that's not going to AI and figuring it out. It's actually a design question. So that would be my homework for everybody.
Okay, and if you need some inspiration on the Precare AI website, you find that picture that we just looked at with the entire agent list. Consti, before I get to you, the results are in from the poll. Basically, a quarter is saying we're not doing anything. Spend on data analytics is only 40%, which always fascinates the hell out of me. Intake management, again, just 19. Oh, sorry, I can share this, by the way, with you. Sourcing 28%, so supplier management 25, contract management a bit higher. But so again, thinking about what we heard earlier, that people are prepared, either the organizations are not doing anything in this direction or something else is wrong. But these numbers are fairly low, I would say, considering for how long some of these capabilities have been around as well. Konsti, final words. We're on the hour. Thank you very much, first of all, Dr. Elouise, for joining us today. But Konsti, what is your final takeaway or recommendation?
Yes, so I think while you're building and interacting basically with those 20 agents that Elouise basically mentioned that we should do as homework, which I 100% agree, because we have to start small, we have to start on a personal, individual level, and there essentially it starts with like engaging with the curiosity that we have and basically start building these things in our daily work, experimenting with agents, with prompts, essentially really learning by doing. That builds up the confidence, that builds up our personal productivity. And then, as we talked about at the very beginning of this webinar, I think some structured content, I think, can also help, right? And I think that's essentially where I want to like that we as Procure.ai have worked on some quite exciting stuff in the last few weeks, and basically I will post this actually here in the chat. It's really about our Procure.ai Academy, which essentially is a learning hub with content and examples and guidance to help procurement professionals to really get hands-on with AI. And this is really just the beginning, right? So as we talked about before, this is not just an online course, but it's really like the next steps from this will be also will be adding more content directly targeted at the different personas that we have in procurement. The age groups, I will take that away as an input as well, but also essentially getting more practical as well. So I think that's also where we will start thinking about providing an AI studio where you can start building your own AI agents with a procurement angle. That's not there yet, so it's mainly starting with really a course on AI literacy in procurement, but this will be also in parallel to building your own agents, a good starting point to get more theoretical and practical knowledge around procurement. So sign up; it's really cool. Like I'm really excited, essentially, that we are doing this, and yeah, I think that's where I would let you off.
And I remember us talking about that topic in April already, Elouise. So therefore, it's nice to see that finally come to fruition, because it is something where, as we discussed in depth earlier in the conversation, it's not enough. It's never gonna actually teach you how to do things, but it's giving you the framework in which you need to operate. And I think if you now take just away having a look at Notebook LM and like maybe the meeting scheduler, plus thinking about what kind of agents to build, you're already so far ahead from all of the people out there just sitting there waiting for their company to hand them a training on AI. So therefore, I hope this was super interesting for you. I love this kind of discussion. So thank you very much to both of you for being so open, being so controversial, for saying that 100% of these initiatives fail. They definitely will continue to fail if people don't get their stuff together and start becoming a little bit more literate about it. Again, thank you so very much. And yeah, everybody, please flood Dr. Elouise's inbox on LinkedIn with your recommendations and ideas of what she should be working on for you. That was a unique invitation. And sign up to Consti's literacy school, basically, or the Procurement Academy, as we phrased it. And yeah, continue your learning journey, basically. Thank you very much. Have a wonderful evening, and talk very soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.